Morning, everyone. I'll introduce today's speaker. Ken Sher is an executive coach and career coach with 30 years of experience at Johnson & Johnson and Bristol Myers Squibb. He has his own executive coaching and career coaching practice since 2015. During his 25 years at Johnson & Johnson, Ken served in various leadership roles in sales, marketing, sales training, leadership development, and he led the sales recruiting department for the United States, where he learned valuable keys to the job search process. He was laid off at 52 years old, struggled to recover from that blow, then landed three new jobs while still in his 50s. I'd like to introduce Ken Shearer.
Okay, and I'm going to be sharing my screen. Can you all see that okay? David, you got my screen
Yes,
showing
to
right?
survive and thrive. I do see the screen. Thanks, Ken.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. As I was preparing for this talk, I was looking at the title again, and it's something I started doing this talk years ago. I've updated it to the modern era, so don't worry. But survive and thrive, it sounds so dramatic. And I was thinking back to why would I name it something that has that kind of drama to it. And it all comes back to my story, which is probably very similar to a lot of your stories if you're out of work looking for your next role. As was mentioned in the introduction, I spent 25 years at Johnson and Johnson. I was in different sales and marketing leadership roles, and I was having a great career. Everything was going great until all of a sudden it wasn't. Uh, we got a new general manager at the operating company I was working at, and in our very first meeting, and I was at this time leading sales training and a leadership development team, a global team. And he said to me that he'd led two similar departments in his career, and I would never live up to his expectations. That was our first meeting. That's a part of the introduction. And I was thinking at the time, he needs to come to one of my leadership development meetings because we don't teach that there. And I was certainly taken aback. And usually in those situations, I'm the person who's driving home saying, "Oh, I should have said this. I should have said." Performance reviews, I think you'll find I always have met or exceeded expectations. So I look forward to exceeding yours. Yeah, I felt like that was almost like a drop the mic moment. I felt really good about that response until he looked at me and said, "Nope, you will never live up to my expectations." Now, you would think if I was a smart guy, I would have gotten my resume and LinkedIn profile together then and started to look. But I didn't. And I didn't because I'd had a similar experience with an earlier boss of mine who said, "We're going to be friends at work, but we won't be friends outside of work." And within a year, my wife and I were staying at her shore house with her for a weekend. So I figured I'd turn this guy around too, but I didn't. And a few months later, I got called into the HR office, and with my boss on the telephone, he couldn't get there in person, apparently. I was told I'm done. And when I mentioned the title again, to survive and thrive, I realized that it is drama filled situation. It is dramatic because I really do believe that losing your job in a lot of situations can be like going through the five stages of grief. I remember I was really knocked out on this. Initially when he told me I wouldn't live up to his expectations, I was thinking, of course I will. I'm not concerned about that. And then when he let me go, boy, was I mad. And I still am to some extent. And it's not good. That's not helpful. I've mostly purged that from me. There's a small little part of me that has a special place in my heart for Eric. I won't use his last name. And then I was thinking, okay, let me call people. I'm going to try to get back into J&J somehow, some way. And you might have experienced this too if you're out of work. Some of those people who I thought were my good friends all of a sudden weren't returning my calls so quickly or at all. But interestingly, there were some people who I didn't know I was so close to who really stepped up to help me out. And I ultimately worked through it and realized there's nothing I can do. Now, when I say I work through it, the depression part of the five stages of grief. I actually did go into therapy. I went on antidepressants. I was in that bad a shape. In fact, I had my first therapy session. It was about an hour and a half long. And then I went home, and the next week I came back, and after 45 minutes, the therapist said, "Okay, Ken, let's start wrapping things up." And I said, "Lynn, what do you mean? This only been 45 minutes. Last week was an hour and a half, and I'm paying you the same amount." And she said, "Well, last week I just didn't feel comfortable letting you get behind the wheel of a car because you were not in a good situation." I remember going home to my wife and saying, "Can you believe she said that about me?" And my wife said, "Yes, I can believe it because you weren't doing well." And the reason why I share that is because I think a lot of people go through that, and it happens, that it's life, and you have to figure out whatever it takes for you to work through that because you have to get to a positive state of mind. You need to get to a point where it doesn't matter that you're out of work, and you could call it whatever you want to call it. You could call it being laid off or terminated, or maybe you were part of the great resignation. You decided, I can't, I'm not going to take it anymore. Um, but the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter why you're out of work. You're out of work. There's nothing you can do about it at this point, right? Coach K from Duke basketball team, he had an expression, next play, because there's nothing you could do about what's already happened, whether it's good or bad. You've got to move on to the next play. And for me, one of the things I had to come to grips with is actually, and I remember the first time I said it, it was kind of weird coming out of my mouth, that I was fired. I wasn't laid off or terminated or part of the great resignation. I was fired. And that's a blow to the ego. And that's made it even worse for me, feeling like, well, maybe I'm not so good after all. Maybe I do have issues I got to deal with, which is always the case with everybody, but that one hurt quite a bit. So we're going to talk about a lot of these things, about how you could and should have a positive mindset. And we're going to give you some real life examples and things you can do, and a process you can take to really accelerate your job search and improve your chances of landing your next job. But as I mentioned, it all starts with getting your head straight first. You need to have a positive attitude. And it's very easy to say, for someone to say, "Come on, get over it, stiff upper lip, get out there and get the next job." But as I mentioned to you, I've been through it, and I know it's not always that easy. But it does start in your head. You have to start to convince yourself and remind yourself how good you are, and convince yourself that you will land a new job, and a new good job. And in fact, I've found that more often than not, people who, once they get that next job, they look back and say, "You know what? I'm glad that happened. I'm glad I got out of there. It was toxic. I wasn't happy. I wasn't doing the work I want to do." But it starts with getting your head straight. I mentioned to you about, I like to think as a coach, I'm a practical coach. And like I said, I know it's easy to say it, but you've got to start to say it and get it in your head. And the more you say it, the more you'll start to believe it. I'm going to talk about ways that you could remind yourself of the value you have to bring. It starts, like I said, with attitude. You need to have that attitude. You need to believe in your head, "I am going to get this job." Henry Ford once said, "Whether you believe you can or you can't, you are correct." So you might as well believe you can, because you want to know that. You want to know, I will land my next job. It will be better than I had before. And in fact, any of you who might practice the law of attraction, you might even consider putting it in a past tense. I have a great job. I have landed a great job. I am happy making the money I'm making in the role I'm in. And if that's a mantra you start to get in your head, you will start to attract opportunities. But I also want you to ask yourself this. I want you all to think about your best friend, or someone you're really close to. And if they came to you one time and they lost their job, and they said to you, "Oh man, I lost my job. I'm really bad. I'm not a good employee. I'm not going to get a new role. No one's ever going to hire me. I'm too old. I'm too this. I'm too that. I'm never going to get a new job." How would you respond to that friend? I'm guessing you would be very supportive. I'm guessing you would say, "Come on, that's not true. You know you have value to offer. Look at your track record. Look at your experience. I believe in you. I know you can do well." And yet we don't do that for ourselves. We have this inner voice in our head that, when it gets negative, sometimes can get really loud, bouncing around in there, telling you all these things, these nasty things that you would never say to anybody else, yet that voice in your head will say it to you. So you really need to also practice self-compassion. You need to give yourself a break. And when you hear that voice in your head, say, no, that is not true. I know I'm good. I know I'm going to get a new job. It's coming. It's right around the corner. I just got to persevere, keep my eyes open for opportunities, and it will come. You've got to believe that. And what I find when that voice in my head gets particularly loud, sometimes if I say it out loud, if I really listen to it, I realize how ridiculous sounding it is. When I say it out loud, that voice can't survive the light of day because it's ridiculous. I'll never get a job. I'm too old. I'm too this. I'm too that. That's not true. I know I'm going to land a job. So sometimes it's not about ignoring that voice in your head. To me, it's about confronting it, practicing self-compassion, and recognizing that you have a lot to offer and you will land the next job. So if any of you have ever seen the TED Talk by Amy Cuddy about power poses, I highly recommend it. It's one of the most watched TED Talks out there. And she's a great speaker. You'll laugh, you'll cry, maybe you'll bring some popcorn along, eat popcorn. But she talks about power poses, and power poses are really just having an open stance. Think about Wonder Woman, hands on hips, legs hip width apart. Think about somebody crossing a finish line in a race. Those are power poses. And what Amy Cuddy did was she did some experiments. And she found that when people practice those power poses for as little as 2 minutes a day, they actually raise their testosterone level and lower their cortisol levels. And the cortisol is a hormone that's the fight or flight hormone. Back in the day, our ancestors, if a saber-toothed tiger was coming along, cortisol levels would shoot up because it was a fight or flight situation for them. So if you could reduce that and increase testosterone, which gives you confidence and strength, you'll find yourself better off. And she actually demonstrated that that can happen if you practice these power poses. And some of you may have heard me tell my story. My last corporate job, after as was mentioned in the intro, I had 3 new jobs in my 50s, was with Bristol Myers Squibb. And when I went in to interview for that job, I got there early and the receptionist said, okay, please have a seat. They'll be with you in a few minutes. I went into the restroom. Of course, first I looked under each stall to make sure there was nobody in there. And then I stood in front of the mirror with my best power pose, hoping like hell nobody would walk in and see what this crazy guy's doing in front of the mirror. And I'm not sure, whether that was why I got the job or not, but I did get the job. It certainly didn't hurt. And whether it's psychological or whether the hormones actually do change, it was really, I think it's worthwhile considering. And check out the video. It's about 15, 17 minutes long. It's worth the watch. The other thing about being out of work, don't let other people define who you are. And that was one of the problems I had. I was with Johnson & Johnson for 25 years, and that was who I was. I loved being at J&J. I still love J&J, by the way, even though I don't like the way my career ended there. But I love carrying around my American Express card with Johnson & Johnson on it. When I had a company car when I was in sales, I loved that. I was Johnson & Johnson. And then when this guy told me I wasn't good enough, at least that's how I translated it, to be at Johnson & Johnson anymore, that's why I ended up in therapy and on antidepressants, because I allowed other people to tell me who I was or who I wasn't. And so I think you need to, again, be confident in yourself, believe in yourself. You can't let other people define who you are. And that's a hard thing to do. I mean, I still struggle with that, to be honest with you, but it's something you need to be aware of. And one of the things I recognized while I was at J&J was how J&J has been so successful over all these years. I mean, they're so successful over 50 plus years in every quarter for these 50 plus years, they pay dividends on the stock, on their share to their shareholders. And I really believe that the basis of Johnson & Johnson's success is trust. They've built trust with all their stakeholders. And the way they do that is actually it's based on something called the Johnson & Johnson Credo. And that's a 1-page document, 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph talks about Johnson & Johnson's responsibility to the healthcare workers and the patients they serve. The second paragraph is about the responsibility to the employees. giving them a fair wage and a safe environment to work in. The third paragraph is the responsibility to the communities they serve, making sure they're good stewards of the environment. And the fourth paragraph is to shareholders. What's interesting about that, by the way, is when it was written by General Robert Wood Johnson, one of the founders or the founder of Johnson & Johnson, he was the only shareholder. But he knew, he trusted in the fact that if he took care of those other three constituents, healthcare workers and their patients, employees, and the community, that he would be taken care of. And all these years later and all these dividend payouts later, he clearly was true. In fact, if you think about, I'm sure many of you remember the Tylenol scare back in the 80s, and that's when somebody tampered with the bottles of Tylenol in Chicago in particular, and people died taking Tylenol. Well, J&J had to, what were they going to do? They're the baby company, they're the mother company, everybody trusts them. And now the people are dying taking the product. So what they did, they looked at the credo, first responsibilities to our healthcare workers and the patients they serve, and they took Tylenol off the shelves all around the world at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars. But they did that because they had a trust with their customers that they couldn't break. And when they put Tylenol back on the market with the first tamper-resistant bottle, it quickly became the number one over-the-counter pain reliever again. Why? Because that trust was there. The customers knew, wow, Johnson & Johnson didn't put profits in front of people. They took that product off the shelf. We trust them. We're going to continue to go. So use the product. So I truly believe that trust is the foundation of all great relationships. And great relationships are the key to success. And it's because of that that I developed what I call the trust success model. And this, I think, is really useful whether you're looking for a new job or whether you're currently in a role. And there are different focuses depending on each. And obviously, I'm going to focus here about the job search. But trust is about transparency, about not holding things back, being open and honest with yourself and the people you're dealing with. It's about results, delivering results, not just the end result, but maybe milestones along the way and recognizing them and celebrating them. It's about understanding the marketplace, understanding social media in particular, and how that can help you get to where you want to. It's about simplifying things. There's so many things going on in the world, so much coming at us at one time. You got to simplify, prioritize, and focus. And then you have to have the right teams in place, the teams that'll help you get to where you want to get to. So we're going to with yourself, taking inventory.
Is the audio going in and out for others as well?
I've experienced it only twice, Frank, right at the start and just now for another 5 seconds or so.
Yeah, same as myself.
I've had it about 3 times as well. Yep.
I'm sorry about that. Hopefully, are you getting enough to know what the heck I'm talking about?
Yes, almost.
Yep.
Your presentation's coming through. Just you have these
I'm in
5
the
seconds.
Poconos. I'm in the Poconos. Sometimes it feels like we're in the middle of nowhere, so I apologize for that. I'm going to be having a direct line hooked up to my computer soon, so we don't suffer from this. But that doesn't help us now. Hopefully, we'll be mostly here for you.
Yeah,
but I
don't
was
worry
saying,
about it.
all right, thank you. I was saying that so with taking inventory of yourself, figuring out, okay, now I'm out of work. Where am I? Where do I go from here? Let me take inventory. And there are a number of reasons why this is beneficial for a job seeker. First, it allows you to kind of reflect, and you should take some time, be introspective, think about what were the roles I've had in the past that I really liked? What are the skills that I use that made me most engaged at work? And do I like working as an individual contributor? Do I want to be a leader? Do I want to work remotely? Do I want to be in an office? All those things you want to get down and take inventory of. You also want to take inventory of some of the successes you've had in the past, as many as you can come up with. Think about each role. Why was I successful in that role? What were the things I did that impacted that role, that changed it, that contributed to the company or in any way? And get all those things down on paper, or on your computer. And the benefits you get from that are this. First of all, you're gathering information that's going to fill in your resume, your LinkedIn profile, and be part of your interview answers. Second of all, you are beginning to prepare for your interviews, which you never know when they're going to happen. But one of the benefits that's kind of almost a side benefit is as you do that, you'll start looking at your stuff and thinking, you know what? I do have a lot to offer. I am pretty good. I'm gonna be landing a great job soon because I don't care that that company let me go. I don't care what they said about me or to me because now that I look at all this stuff, I remember I'm good. And to be honest with you, as I mentioned, I went through all that difficult time, and I actually would carry that around with me. And there were times when I was down and feeling like, man, I don't know, maybe I'm not so good. Maybe I won't land a job as I thought. But I would take that out and I would remind myself, no, I got a lot to offer. And I can't wait to tell people that in interviews and networking conversations. But you really want to think about that because this is an opportunity too. You could think of it as, oh, I lost my job. What am I going to do? Or I lost my job. This might be an opportunity for me to change what I'm doing. And one thing it might seem like semantics even. What do you think you want versus what do you really want? But I remember leaving my office one night when I was at J&J. It was 6:30, whatever. And my boss was in the office next to me. I was a product director. He was the group product director, which would have been my next role if I was still moving up in the company. And I remember saying goodnight to him, and he turned around from his computer to say goodnight, and his face was drawn. He looked beat. He was stressed. He looked horrible. And I drove home that night thinking, I've always aspired for that next role. I've always worked for that next role and gotten that promotion and wanted that promotion. I think I don't want that job anymore. I like being at the director level. I'm having an impact. I have enough stress and responsibility. I don't need anymore. So it was at that point where I realized I thought I wanted a promotion up until I really thought about it and realized, you know what? I don't need to lead a whole group like that. I love leading one product and a couple of people, or I love being a sales leader, but I didn't need the pressure of being a group marketing person. So think about take inventory, and it really will help you figure out what you want to do. And you want to think about all these things besides doing an inventory of your past work experience. You want to think about what kind of work situation do you want to put yourself in. And all these things are things you have to take in consideration. Some people now will not even go interview for a job if they don't have the opportunity to work remote at least part of the time, at least a hybrid situation. If that's you, that's fine. You just got to know that, that might limit you in some areas, but if you feel like there still will be enough opportunity for you to land a job, then that's what's important to you. You got to go with that. When I was out of work, I kind of did this. I thought about, what are the things that I've liked in my job? I love being a sales manager and coaching people and helping people get better. I love leading and motivating people and providing value to the people I was working with. And when I would help someone be better in sales, for example, and they would make a big sale and that would impact their lives and their families' lives, to me, that was the greatest thing going. So I was out of work and thought about all those things I loved to do and loved about my work. I thought I could go back and be a sales manager. I would love that role. Or I could be a teacher, teaching people, similar to coaching people, or I could become a coach. And clearly I chose to become a coach. And I am now a career coach, executive coach, and I help people change their professional lives and improve their overall lives because of it. And that was done through taking inventory, taking stock of what I was and what I'd done. And then you want to think about, okay, now that I know what direction I want to go in, how do I go about finding those opportunities? Certainly you can go and find people in that field that you are or in that role you're in. Start talking to them, learning about how they got there, what their career is like. You could target companies. You should target companies. Which are the companies that I might want to work with? And then you want to find some recruiters as well. Now, what's important about the mix of things you use to find your next opportunity is remember that 75 to 80% of jobs are landed through somebody you know, 10 to 15% through a recruiter, and only about 5% by just posting randomly online for jobs. So you should spend your time accordingly. You should spend a vast majority of your time building your network, connecting with people, having conversations with people. And then you should spend some time talking to recruiters, but again, much less, and even less than that, posting for jobs. In fact, I would suggest only post for jobs if you've exhausted every avenue you have to find someone you know at that company that might be able to give you some insight, or in the best case scenario, hand you it's what makes you different. It's your value proposition. You know, some people might question branding. How important is branding in a job search? Well, branding is important. We all have a personal brand. Now, just to step back a little and think about a company brand, if I say to you the breakfast of champions, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are thinking about Wheaties and that orange Wheaties box. That brand was established in the 1930s, 90 years ago. Yet I didn't even say the product name and you knew what it was. So the question you want to ask yourself is, what is your brand? What do people think about when they hear your name? And if you're not sure, ask people. Ask former colleagues, supervisors, friends. What do you think about, from a professional point of view, what do you think about when you hear my name? And if you don't hear what you want to hear, oh, she's a great problem solver. She's a go-to person who gets things done. She is a project manager. Whatever it is, you need to change that. And here's some examples. Before I actually get to that, there's a great book called The Art of Hello, and I've also seen Paula speak a couple times, and to me, it really changed my approach. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the elevator speech. And I got to be honest with you, I've never been a fan of the elevator speech. If you think about, you've been in these rooms, these networking rooms, let's go around the room, everybody take 30 to 60 seconds and give your elevator speech. Think about how many of those people do you really remember what they do? How many of those people do you even know what they do, even after they give their elevator speech? And I would say to you, most of them are not very memorable, mine included, by the way. And that's not helpful. So what Paula says is that if you can get your hello, your introduction to 10 words or less, that's compelling, that's interesting, it's memorable, that's really the way to go. And I'll give you an example. She's an executive recruiter. She introduces herself by saying, I'm Paula Calise. I'm an executive recruiter. I fill hard to fill positions. That's it. Now, she has all the elevator speech information behind her, she calls them pillars, to give, here's how I fill a position, these are the types of positions, all that stuff. But she introduces herself that way. When she speaks, they introduce her that way. She got a call in her car. She was driving. Somebody from Europe called her and said, is this Paula? She said, yes. He said, I hear you fill hard to fill positions. So if you could boil down what you do into 10 words or less, 10 compelling, interesting, memorable words or less, you're going to be in great shape. That's kind of what your personal brand will be. And again, you'll have more detail behind it, but that's how you introduce and start yourself. So here are some examples. You might start off, in my case, I might say, I help people, I'm Ken Sher, I'm a career coach, executive coach. I help people change their professional life for the better. And I would hope someone would say, really, how do you do that? And then I would get into it a little more. I'm a career coach, executive coach. I help people at all points of their career, whether they're in career transition or currently working. I help them to realize their potential and achieve more than they ever thought they could. And that's how then hopefully we get into a deeper conversation. Another example, you might say, I'm a project manager who delivers projects on time and under budget. Really? How do you do that? Well, my colleagues told me they really appreciate that I look to understand what the desired outcome is, and then I'm relentless in focusing on that in everything we do. But I'm still flexible, but I'm disciplined, and the results typically meet or exceed expectations. And here's one last one. Well, here we go. No, I went the wrong way. That's why I did that. Sorry. One last one might be, I'm a master planner and organizer. This might be for someone who maybe has been out of work for a while. Maybe they decided to stay home to take care of their family for whatever reason. And they might say, I'm a master planner and organizer. I successfully run a household of 3 children and 1 spouse. And my fellow stay-at-home parents, they've told me they really admire how I'm able to get everybody involved and engaged because I make things challenging and fun. And that's very similar. I do that because of the skills I learned, and it's very similar to what I used to do in work when I was a, whatever that may be, event planner, product manager, whatever that might be. But think about how you could get that first sentence of yours down to 10 words or less, being interesting, memorable, etc. I'll take a quick break here just to see, are there any questions or comments? And David, I don't see any chat box. I'm focused on my presentation. If you see any there, or if somebody wants to just chime in, I'm happy to clarify anything.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. There are no questions in the chat, but folks, certainly you could quickly unmute and speak to Ken, or if you'd like, post in the chat and we'll read it for you on your behalf. And we'll play the Jeopardy music for a moment and allow people to formulate their questions if that's what it takes.
Okay. Well, and also everyone should know I'm going to stop after each one of these sections, so you can, even if we need to go back to another section, you could always ask a question anytime.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to continue on then and talking about results, and with the results, I'm going to focus more on resumes here.
Oh, excuse me, Ken. Now
Yes.
there is a question, that just got posted. This is from Andrew. What are your thoughts about things like StrengthsFinder? I'm sorry.
I think StrengthsFinder is great. I think anything you can do to really get a focus on what your strengths are and what you want to drive as your main message when you're looking for a job, I think that's important. And I think StrengthsFinders is a great way to do that. It's a great tool to use. Okay, because I think a lot of times when we get out of work, we don't know, what do I do next? I think many of us, regardless of age, are thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up? And when you're out of work, that question becomes even more prominent, and something like StrengthsFinders can help you with that. Okay. So as I said,
thank you. Good.
Sure.
Yep, good.
As I said, we're going to talk about results and focus on resume. And for the resume, you got to remember that you really need to write your resume where you grab their attention quickly and then you keep their interest throughout. Because you're only going to get a very short period of time, as you see, 5 to 7 seconds. And it's not that the recruiter is reading your resume, by the way. They're skimming it. So you need to make it easy for them to see. You need to make it so that things pop for them that will cause them to continue reading. When I write resumes with my clients, I use what is called the fold test. And what the fold test is, if you fold the first page of your resume in half, would it tell enough of a story that someone would either want to keep reading or just put down the resume and pick up the phone to give you a call? And I do that with my clients, and I'll talk to that a bit more in detail in a minute, but I typically will start off with a summary that needs to be an attention grabber. Don't save your good stuff for the work experience section, because if you do, they may never get to it. There's a journalism expression that is don't bury the lead. Because if you put the good stuff in the middle of the article, the reader may never get to it. So that summary up top, it's almost like a thesis statement of yours, very brief reference kind of towards what you've done with a focus forward of what you're going to bring to the party, what makes you the best person for this role that you're applying for. And then I'll follow with the top 3 accomplishments of the person's career. And those accomplishments almost prove that thesis statement, that summary statement up front. Best accomplishments there. And then we'll follow with the skills, probably 3 columns of 3 skills. So when somebody reads that resume, they skim it, they see this great summary that tells what this person has done and what they can do for you. They see examples that mean that they're not just saying that, they've actually done it. And then they're seeing the skills that help them to do those things that prove that thesis. So in half a page, it tells it all, but then the details of the work experience and everything else are behind that. But right up front, they get the good stuff, and that hopefully will catch them within those 5 to 7 seconds. You also have to remember having unprofessional email address. One of the things I know a lot of people are concerned about is ageism. And there is ageism out there. There's no question. But you know what? There's sexism out there. There's racism out there. There's all kinds of isms out there. They're out there. There are small-minded people out there. But you don't want to give them any reason to think of you that way. And for mid to late career people in particular, every now and then I'll have someone come to me with an AOL email address. Well, I joke with them, well, you might as well change that to old.com because that's what it says about you. And if you're concerned about age, I would argue that it's not your age. It's not that you're 50 or 60 years old. It's that you haven't kept up to date with things. You're not technologically comfortable, not even savvy, just comfortable. You have an old email address, that says something. Your LinkedIn profile has all those numbers after it because you haven't updated your URL from the one they gave you. Maybe even the background of your LinkedIn hasn't changed. Those say things like, is this person not comfortable? And I would say to you too, especially if you're concerned about ageism, if you're not, I understand there are times you're on a Zoom call and you don't want to have your camera on. I get it. Hey, I have bad hair days too. Look at me here. But if you're not, you have to show that you're comfortable with technology. And one way to do that is by having your video on and talking in a way that demonstrates that comfort level. Because then maybe they won't even ask you about technology because they see, oh, I see by the way they are on screen, they're very comfortable with technology. Or maybe there's other things you have done that demonstrate, and I'll give you an example of two of that later on as well. Then you got to know too that putting a picture on a resume is no good. I didn't see them for a long time. Then I started to see people come to me with pictures. I don't know why. I mean, I guess on one hand too, the applicant tracking systems aren't great with pictures on them. I think too, maybe people are afraid of being accused of discrimination if they don't bring someone in or hire someone because they saw the picture, even though they can see it on LinkedIn. I'm not sure why, but the reality is you don't want your picture there. And then, as I mentioned, applicant tracking systems will get you too. So there are different types of resume styles, right? You have your chronological, functional, and your combination. Really, the combination is the one I described earlier: summary, key accomplishments. Not everybody does it this way, but then skills, and then you have your work experience, your education, volunteer stuff, technology stuff. That's the combination. The chronological is basically that too. You take your most current job all the way back. The functional is one where people just will group kind of their skills and their accomplishments together, not necessarily by job, but just to drive a particular thing that they do. They'll pick different accomplishments they've had from different parts of their work experience. Often that's done with people who maybe feel like they're older and they don't want to show their chronological order of their work experience because it shows, oh, I started in 1982. They're going to see how old I am. And some people who are changing careers might use that functional. I'm not a fan of it. Most people I know are not fans of it because to me it almost seems like you're trying to hide something. I'd say especially if you're mid to late career, own that. That's experience, that's knowledge that you're bringing to the table. You need to have results. That's why it's part of my trust success model. More often than not, when I get a client come to me with their resume, it's responsibility statements. It's just a list of things they were supposed to do. It doesn't even tell whether they did them at all, let alone how well they did them. So on your resume, you're going to have two types of statements for each job you've had. The first one's a responsibility statement that just tells, here's what I was supposed to do. Kind of almost could come out of a job description. The second are the bullet points. Those are accomplishment statements. This is what separates you from everybody. A lot of resumes I get when they're only pretty much responsibilities, I could put my name on top of that resume and submit it that way because it's mostly academic. These are just things that this job is supposed to do. But the bullet points, those are what separate you because those are what you have done.
You need to focus on results. You'll have two types of statements for each job. The responsibility statement just tells, here's what I was supposed to do. The accomplishment statements are the bullet points that show how well you did that job, what the impact was you had on that job. So you need to make sure that those have results, that you might have words in it like leading to, resulting in, with the outcome of. And it's always great if you have data to show. Salespeople typically can do that, but you don't always have data. But there are ways you can maybe you change a process that was there. Maybe you have to go very general and say leading to improved customer satisfaction. as long as you have something that shows the outcome, it at least differentiates you a bit. Because otherwise, when I get a resume that's filled with responsibility statements, and typically that's what they come to me as, I could put my name on that resume because it's kind of academic. It's anybody can write that, but it's the accomplishment statements, those bullet points that will differentiate you from everybody else. So I apologize for the breakup on that results part, but are there any questions or any clarifications that I can offer? Okay,
Yeah,
I will move on.
One question. Hold on. There's one question I'm seeing. Okay, this is from Peter. What are your thoughts on a one-page executive profile or summary? I created one this past week, and it has my photo on it. At Deloitte Consulting, my last employer, we were required to have a one-page PowerPoint bio for client engagements, which is where this concept originated for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think it's something that you would use probably more so in a networking meeting or conversation. It's something you might use as a door opener if you really want to take a shot at it. You find the person at the company that might be an influencer in terms of hiring. You might send that one pager to them. But I think it's a great way to market yourself. So I think it's a good thing that you have that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the next part of the trust success model is understanding. And in particular, I'm talking about, in this case, understanding social media. LinkedIn in particular, it's really the way, I mentioned 75 to 80% of jobs are landed through someone you know. LinkedIn is a way to build your network, but it's not just about names of people and how many connections you have. You need to make yourself attractive to others. And I mean literally attract recruiters, attract hiring managers to you. And by having a full profile, using keywords in there, and actually being engaged on LinkedIn, that's going to help you to do that. Because LinkedIn is very similar to Google. Think about when you do a Google search. How many times do you go past the first 3 entries that you get back? How many times do you go past the first page? You want to get yourself to that first page. That means you need to use proper terminology. One thing that I find often with people on LinkedIn in particular is they don't necessarily even have their job title or the job title they want in the headline, which is right underneath the picture on LinkedIn. And so you got to think, you want to kind of reverse engineer it. If you were a recruiter looking for you or looking to fill a position that you might be interested in, what words would that recruiter put in the LinkedIn search bar to find you? And if you're a project manager and I'm a recruiter looking for a project manager, pretty good chance I'm going to put project manager into that LinkedIn search bar. So you need to have that in your profile. You need to have that on your resume so people know exactly who you are, what you're about, but also that you attract the right people to you. And you need to continue to tweak your profile until you can get yourself to the first page of results. You might say, how do I know if I'm on the first page? Well, a great way to do it is if you find a connection of yours and you make an agreement with them, you work with them to disconnect from each other, and then do searches on different words. If I were me, I'd do career coach, I'd do executive coach, and ask them to do the search in those words and see where I show up on their search. Because if you're still connected, that's going to skew the results. So if you're not connected, it's like a cold search. And if you're not coming up on that first page or the first 3 entries in particular, then you want to continue to tweak your profile to see how you could get there. I did it once, and I should do it more often, I'll admit. But I went from the 12th page to number 2 on the list. So you can impact how you're found. And you want to do that by getting those keywords out there. And you want to be able to tell a story through your LinkedIn profile, through your about section in particular, that's going to get you found. Now, this word cloud here is one way you can maybe determine what the keyword should be. There's actually a couple ways. First of all, LinkedIn has this new thing. If you go to the More button on your profile, there's a drop down, and one of them says, I think it's create a resume. And then you have the option of creating that resume either directly from your profile or you could upload your own. I would say create a resume from your LinkedIn profile. I don't think they create particularly good resumes, so it's not that I would use it, but they'll show you what are the most prominent words, your keywords, and what words are missing. And then you could fill in your profile with those words. That's one place to start. A second place is you go to a program like wordart.com, and I suggest that one because it's free. There are other ones out there. JobScan's a great one, but you have to pay for that after you get a couple of free scans. But wordart.com, if you go there, what you could do is copy your resume, and then there's an import button, import the resume, which is basically pasting it in, and then there's a visualize button. You hit the visualize, and it'll bring up a word cloud like this, with the biggest words being the ones that appear most often in your resume or in your LinkedIn profile. And then again, are those the keywords you want to have? Are those the keywords that a recruiter might use to find you? And if they're not, and you need other words put in there, then you've got to edit your profile, edit your resume, and get those words in there. Also on LinkedIn, everything counts. You know, starting with your picture. Your picture often is the first impression people are going to get of you, because they're going to find you through LinkedIn. And sometimes people might think, well, I don't want them to see how old I am or whatever it might be. Well, you can't hide your age. In fact, if I put this profile picture up there, somehow people would know that's not me. Based on my work experience, based on when I walk in for that interview, they're going to see I am who I am. So don't try to hide it. I wish I had that hair that I used to have, but I don't have it anymore. I am what I am, and I'm proud of my experience and the knowledge I gained over the years. But everything else counts. The headline under your name, have those keywords I talked about. The summary or the about section. This is important. Now, if you look at your about section, you'll notice that only 4 lines show before you would have to hit the See More button to read everything else. So again, you've got to make those compelling, attention-grabbing 4 lines so that someone will either say, I need to read more, or I need to call this person. And, you could take a similar approach to what I described with the summary and key accomplishments from your resume. You could do it in a same way. And what I often do with my clients is I might talk about, whatever, I'm a project manager, deliver things on time and under budget. And then I might say examples include ... And if that person is intrigued enough, if I've written it well enough, they're going to say, I want to see some of those examples. I'm going to hit the See More button. So you want to make sure that they dig in there. And then just for your about section, after I showed some accomplishments, I would write a couple sentences about the kind of worker I am, what it's like to work with me, the things I deliver or bring to a company. And then the last paragraph might be just a little personal something to round out the picture of who I am. When I'm not working, I volunteer here. I love hiking in the woods with my dog, or whatever it might be. Something that shows you as a full person and that the reader might connect with and say, oh, wow, I love hiking too. Make that connection. And then you always want to have a call to action at the end of your about section. If you want to talk to me about how I can help your company with project management, reach out to me at ken@shercoaching.com. Always want to have that call to action. And if you're currently employed and don't want to show that, you could say, if you want to talk to me about best practices in finance, give me a call or reach out to me at ken@shercoaching.com. And then we talked about a lot of keywords. Excuse me. Also, building a network. Targeted network. Don't just take everybody, but what are the industries you're interested in, the companies you're interested in. Try to connect with people there. Try to get conversations with people there. Build relationships online. The way you build relationships on LinkedIn, if you find a company you're interested in or a person you're interested in at a company who you'd love to work for or with, follow those people. If they're posting on LinkedIn, comment on their stuff. Build relationships by supporting them that way. And you'll find that ultimately they'll either reach out to you to thank you for your support, or you'll be able to reach out to them and say, hey, I've been following you and commenting on your stuff. I'd love to talk to you more about it. And then that's what builds your network, and a powerful, productive network for you. You also have to understand that when you're interviewing for jobs, it's a little different now, right? You're interviewing probably virtually in a lot of cases. People want to know that, what have you been doing during the pandemic? How did it change you? Or since you've been out of work, are you increasing your skills? Are you staying up to date? Are you, are you comfortable with technology? If you're not, take the time to do that. You need to be able to demonstrate your work ethic and that you can balance work and personal life. Because if I'm hiring you and I'm not going to see you every day, I need to know that you're going to be getting these things done, getting work done, that you're not waiting for me to tell you what to do. So your resume and your interview answers should include things about, working independently, about your innovation, about your initiative, about your planning and organization, time management. You want to be able to get those messages across and be prepared to answer those questions if they come to you. Now, another way you could separate yourself through LinkedIn, and this also comes back to another way as a mid to late career job seeker, you could show that you're up to speed and you're technologically comfortable, is by having a video resume. And you can put that in the featured section of LinkedIn. And a video resume is not you reading your whole resume. It's 1 minute or less, more or less. And it's, you want to show people, you want to start with something big, right? Don't bury the lead. Start with that either art of hello message or your elevator speech if you're comfortable with that. And you want to show, it needs to look good. So it shows, oh, this person understands video and how to come across properly. Then it's a minute more or less. It shows it demonstrates your computer skills, your communication skills. And you can even put it in your one pager, for example. You might put a link to your video resume in there. And it's something that will live on your LinkedIn profile and be a differentiator for you. So that's a lot of stuff about LinkedIn. I'm going to stop for any quick questions here.
Okay, so folks, if you've got a question about the prior letter, understanding, please enter that or unmute and have that discussion with Ken right now. So there's another question. How or where is the video resume?
Mm-hmm. Well, you would have to make it. So you would, just like you're using your camera now on Zoom, you would record it that way. Then you'd probably need to edit the beginning and the end. I personally, I'm not real good with technology, but this one was relatively easy for me. What I do is I record it on my computer. I upload it to YouTube, which is not a hard thing to do. And then on YouTube, I'll edit just the beginning and end. That's the extent of what I can do. So it's a clean start and a clean ending. A strange thing to do, but you really need to do this. When you put your camera on, just smile and count to 5 in your head and then start talking, because that gives you an opportunity to edit it more cleanly rather than just jumping into things. And then the same at the end. When you're done talking, just smile for about 5 seconds, counting in your head, and then end the video. It feels weird, but it makes it a much cleaner video. And then again, you would go into the featured section of LinkedIn. There's a pencil there, edit it, and it'll allow you to upload the video. Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Simplify. Simplify, we're going to focus here on interviewing. And the reason why I think you need to simplify the whole interview process is because it's stressful. And there's a lot going on in there. And you got a lot to remember and a lot to do. And you want to make sure that you're not complicating things too much. Sun Tzu was a 5th century Chinese military strategist who wrote the book, The Art of War, which is a perennial best-selling business book. And it's not that war and business are the same, but a lot of the principles are there. The strategic principles are there. And one of the things he said was victorious warriors win first, then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. And what he means is that, think about some athletes, any of you who watch sports. Sometimes you'll see an athlete, they have their headphones on, they're laying on the floor in the locker room, eyes closed, and they're listening to music or maybe a motivational talk or something, and they're visualizing the game. They're playing the game in their heads before they get out on the field or the court. And so that when they get out on the field or the court, it's familiar. They've already done that in their mind. It's easier to handle as opposed to going out there and trying to figure out, what am I going to do? So you want to be prepared. And in interviewing, I talk about the 3 P's of interviewing: prepare, process, and practice. Think about anything you're pretty good at today. If there are any golfers out there, or all of us, or most of us probably drive a car. when you first got behind the wheel of a car, you probably weren't real comfortable with it. You didn't know how to do the things you do today. I remember being in the car, and I had my three friends were in the back seat. We took a driving class together, and I'm the first one to drive, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm driving along. Yeah, I got this down until the instructor said to me, "Hey, Ken, you want to press on the gas a little bit and catch up to that turtle that just passed us?" Apparently, I was going too slow. My point is, it took time till I got comfortable and practiced for it. And in fact, before I even got behind the wheel of the car, in that case, we took a couple of classes learning what we had to do being in that car. So you need to start by preparing. You need to know everything about the company, do research on the company, Google them, look at any public documents, any newspaper ads, articles about them. If you know who the interviewer is, get on LinkedIn, learn about them. Sometimes people say, "Oh, are they going to see I'm looking at them? Is that okay?" Yeah, that's okay. I would love that as an interviewer. I want to know, wow, they're doing their research. They want to learn about me. And you want to find, is there anything common there that you might be able to connect with the interviewer on? Think about this when you're interviewing. They're probably bringing in 3 to 5 people to interview. Every one of those people are qualified. Every one of those people meet the requirements. Otherwise, they wouldn't be coming in. Quick side note, if you're a mid to late career person and you're worried about ageism, if you get called in for an interview, throw ageism out the door because they know what you look like. They've looked at your LinkedIn profile. So you focus on being the best candidate you can be. Don't even worry about age at all. But anyway, if everybody's qualified and everybody meets the requirements, what's going to separate you? Well, it might be how you connect with that interviewer. And doing your research, preparing by learning anything you can about that interviewer, if you have that opportunity, can help you. Could be the difference between landing that job and not. Process, I'm a huge believer in a process. I'm going to talk to you about it in a second. But the reason why I like a process is because there's a beginning, middle, and an end. When I get stressed out, I can get a little rambly and talk on and on and on. And that's not a good look for an interview. When I was younger and interviewing for a job, I remember getting comfortable and feeling pretty good about how things were going. So I started kind of going off script a little bit. And I would answer an interview question and I would kind of digress and I'd go a little more and a little more until that voice in my head was screaming, get back, you're too far. Because I was so far, I didn't even know what I was talking about anymore. And I had to ask the interviewer, what was the question again? Not a good look for an interview, as I said. So a process gives you a beginning, middle, and end. It's a way to tell a story. And storytelling, first of all, it's the most effective sales method out there. And you are in sales now. You're selling yourself. You're in sales and marketing, right? So you're selling yourself in an interview. And storytelling, everybody loves a good story. They're memorable, they're compelling, they're interesting. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. And then you want to practice. And you got to practice out loud. Don't practice in your head, because often the words that are in your head don't necessarily come out the way you want them to come out. So as much as you can, try to make it so that the first time the words come out of your mouth are not in that interview. You've practiced it, you know. And so the other thing that I coach my clients on is something called the primacy recency effect. And that is that people remember most what you say first and what you say last. So that's where you want to have that art of hello, that strong branding statement when you introduce yourself, or part of the tell me about yourself question. But I also recommend to my clients, when you're done at the end of an interview, you've asked your question, you've asked about next steps, you thank them for their time. Say something to the effect of, I really appreciate the time here. I'm even more excited about this role than I was before I came in. And if there's one thing you remember from this discussion we had, please remember that I'm a career coach and an interview coach, and I help people improve their professional lives. And if that's the message, or I'm a project manager and I deliver projects on time and under budget, that's the last thing they hear, a good, strong, positive message about yourself. That's going to bode well for you. So keep that in mind. I love STAR. I love it so much I made it plural, STARS, standing for situation, task, action, result, and so what. And this is how you tell the story. Here was the situation. I got this big a new product that I needed to launch. So I needed to figure out how I'm going to launch it successfully. That's the situation task right there. So what I did was I put together a team of market research people, finance people, sales people, and we set up a timeline and a project plan to first develop our messaging. We developed packaging. We had manufacturing in there. We did all this stuff. And we put together a great plan, and we launched the product right on time, the way we had promised. And the results were fantastic right out of the gate, blah, blah, blah. Talk about some results. Now, here's the key. Whether you use a process or not, the so what to me is most important, because that allows you to paint the picture of you in that role. It makes it so that you could tell the interviewer, here's why this is important. The reason why that's important is because I know you have a bunch of new products coming up, and you need to have someone in this position that knows how to successfully launch a product. And I think this example shows I'm that person, or I can do that. So you're painting the picture and you're telling them what to do, telling them why you told them that example. The other thing is you don't want to leave it to chance that they're going to take your example you gave and translate it into the message you want them to take away from that. Now, you might think, obviously, they're going to know that you were talking about, product launch and that's why you want it. Well, that might be the case, but maybe I really wanted to stress my project management ability, my ability to take a project from beginning to end. And they didn't get that. And that's maybe what's most important for this role. The word obvious is a terrible word, because what's obvious to you is not necessarily obvious to me. Think about what's going on in our politics today. What's obvious to a Democrat is not obvious to a Republican, and vice versa. So telling people specifically why you gave them that example, I think, is key to a successful interview. And then make it easy for yourself. What I coach my clients to do is write down all your stars answers. And then let's see when might you use it? And you might put, depending on the skills or competencies associated with the job you're interviewing for, decision making. Here's 2 stars I'm going to use here. Leadership. Here's 2 stars I'm going to use here. And then whatever they might be. And some of them may be the same, right? You're not going to have 20 different stars, but you should probably have between 5 and 10 that you could pull out at any time. And then when you're in that interview, don't worry so much about the question, especially sometimes they ask these questions, which I hate. If you were a window washer in Philadelphia, how much would you charge to clean every window in the city? I hate those questions. I don't get them. I don't understand it. But if I'm thinking, they want to know about my analytical ability or my problem solving ability or my decision making, whatever it might be, I got a star for them for that. And then you go that way. So it might just help you to organize your thoughts and maybe be make it a little simpler when you're in that interview. So I'll stop there before I get into the final section. Any thoughts or comments about this, David?
There's nothing at the moment in the chat. Of course, people could be typing as I'm saying that. Or anyone, if you have a quick question for Ken, you might just want to quickly unmute and ask your question, and saves a little bit of time. So go ahead and do that if you'd like. So, yep, there's a lot of information people are posting in chat, their introductions of themselves, contacts, so that's good as well. Feel free to share that in chat. And also, Ken, what I'll do in a few minutes is post your contact information in chat for anyone that may want to reach out to you after this session or during the week.
Great. Thank you, David. And this last section is kind of a short one, and then I'll open up for Q&A and anything else you want to talk about.
Okay,
overall.
Sounds good. And to let people know, after the session is over in the next few minutes, we'll keep the virtual session open. It won't be recorded beyond Ken's presentation. And we can just hang around and chit chat. And if you've got the time, you're welcome to join us for as long as you can. But we just kind of hang out, and it becomes our after party. So something else to look forward to.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Let's go.
All right. So the last part of the trust success model is about teams. And really I think having people to support you is key. Isolation is the enemy of the unemployed. I mentioned earlier about that voice in your head. And if you're alone in your office every day, even if you feel busy, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm writing emails, whatever, that voice can get pretty loud. What did I do today? Did I get anything done? Am I ever going to land that job? And it gets louder and louder. So I really do believe isolation is the enemy of the unemployed. So get out there, build your network, find people. Some people say, I hate networking. I don't know where to start. Start small. Start with people you have good relationships with, former colleagues, former college alum, former customers or clients. Start networking. And one of the things that I think people, why they don't like networking so much is because, especially when they're out of work, is because they think it's about asking for a job. And that's exactly the opposite of what networking is. Networking is not about asking for a job. That's, in fact, the quickest way to close down your networking effort. Because nobody wants to refer somebody or introduce somebody who's going to ask for a job. It's off-putting. Networking is about meeting people, learning about them, learning about their career, learning about their job, learning about what they like and don't like about their industry or what they do, getting advice or guidance from them, getting other introductions to other people, offering help to that person, and then staying connected with them as best you can. Building a network like that will help you get to your next job, because that's what leads to conversation. You know what, David, I don't have anything here, but I know somebody you should talk to. Or a couple weeks later, you get a call. Hey, I heard, I remember we talked about this. There's a role now you might be interested in. Or maybe you see a role at that company and you call them back and say, hey, you said you'd help me out last time. I really appreciate that. I just saw this opening here. Do you know the manager? Can you get my resume in front of them? Because if you think about it, most jobs today, they're going to receive a lot of applications. They're going to receive 50, 100, 200 or more resumes. So think about that visually. You got this pile of resumes, right? It's just a bunch of pieces of paper with a bunch of names of people I don't know. But then someone who I respect, someone at least who works for my company, understands the culture, understands what we're looking at, doesn't want to ruin their reputation by giving me somebody bad. They come in with a resume and they say, hey, check this person out. Well, that big pile of resumes, your resume goes right on top. And so I always say to people, if you see a job online that you think is a perfect job, I love it, I want it, that's me, don't apply for it. And I say that to be provocative. What I mean is, first thing to do is go to your network. Who do I know that's working there? Or who do I know who knows somebody who's working there? I need to get an introduction. I need to get in there that way. And then there's going to come a point where you might say, I'm not finding anyone. I really want to apply for this job. Well, at that point, you should apply online before they take it down. Typically, those jobs are up 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. So you want to get to it early. But networking is going to get you there. And then also all your relationships. The second team you want to have is a personal relationship. It's your family. It's your friends. It's people that are going to pick you up when you're feeling down, people that you want to be with when you want to celebrate the success, celebrate you landing your new job. So if you have your professional network helping you connect and meet people, keeping you up and going during the job search, because that is, there's a lot of negativity in the job search, that's going to bode well for you as well. And remember, somebody else, all kinds of things, but it only takes one yes. And every no you get, you're moving closer to getting that yes. The yes is out there. You got to believe that. You got to know that you will get there. Sometimes you got to go through a lot of failure or a lot of no's to get there. But I also believe that failure should be a good thing. You learn from it, you grow from it, and you move on. So I'll just put a quick wrap on it, and then I'm going to go to questions and take myself off camera here. But I really do believe the trust success model can help you, even if you're already in a job search. It's not about just starting. You might go back and just check yourself. Take inventory in the transparency stage. Look at your resume. Are there results there? And if you're not sure, ask somebody. Do you have a full profile on LinkedIn, and are you engaged on LinkedIn, trying to comment, post, repost things? Interviewing, are you preparing well? Do you have a good process for answering interview questions? Are you practicing out loud? If you get stressed out in interviews, the antidote for stress is confidence. And the way you build confidence is by practicing, so that you walk into that interview feeling like, ask me anything. I'm ready. No matter what you ask me, I got it. Stress will be lower. Your confidence will be higher. And then have those teams that will support you and help you get to where you want to get to. This is my contact information. David is going to, I think you said you're going to share the presentation with people. These are active links. I'm happy. Typically, I give a 30-minute complimentary coaching session if you want me to look at your resume, your LinkedIn profile, or you just want to talk about your job search. There's no obligation after that, no pressure at all. I do have a guide I'd be happy to share with you, and you can reach out to me directly if you want to as well. So I do thank you all very much for your time. I hope that the technological issues we had didn't deter you from getting some helpful information from this. And please, at any time, reach out. I'd be happy to help you in any way I can. Thank you very much.
Well, great. Thank you, Ken. We're getting some applause we see in the camera, so thank you. So folks, if you got a question or two, this is your opportunity to ask Ken. And Ken, I did put your contact information in chat as well. We will also be sharing chat through the Breakfast Club website, so you can look at your comments or answers to questions there. And when you can, Ken, do send me the slide deck. I don't recall that I have it right now. Of course, we do have the recording we can go back to, which will not have the little time gap that we had as we reconnected your audio. It never happened. We're like Surf Pro, like it never happened.
Well, I'm glad you're technologically savvy, David. Thank you.
Yep. Enough to edit that out. And by the way, if anyone wants it left in, I can be bribed. So I'll start a bidding war between you and Ken. No, it will be cut out to the
fair
best
enough.
So, yeah, a question or two for Ken before we sign off. And then when we do
even
in the
if it's
meeting,
not related to my presentation.
Just a comment on Ken's presentation, particularly this last part about being on edge in interviews and that business about confidence and how do you build that by practice. When people ask me, what should I do in interviews? I said, take every one of them you can get. And you never know what's going on there. One is, of course, the practice, but two is you're letting people see you. And they may have other ideas, people you should be talking to, that kind of thing. Great presentation, Ken.
Thank you, Jeff. Does anybody have, if you have it doesn't have to be about my presentation, but sometimes I find people think about specific interview situations. Well, I was asked this question, I don't know how to answer it, or maybe can you give me another example of a STARS answer? I mean, if you have anything even that specific, I'd be more than happy to help you with it.
I have a question. At what point, if you're unsure, would you ask about the dress code at a company?
That's a. Mm-hmm.
I've worn a suit on Zoom interviews with a certain company, but they're a consulting company, and I see some pictures online, people with suits on, but I don't know whether that's the dress code.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I do think that too also, by the way, could be a tell regarding age, right? So, just an example, and this is an extreme, if you were interviewing with an IT startup company and you wore a suit and tie, well, that probably doesn't match, right? You're probably interviewing with some kid with a ripped T-shirt and ripped jeans on. So you want to make sure you're dressing the part. I think often you could look at companies' websites, and maybe see how people are dressed there. There may be an industry standard. If you know somebody there, you could ask them what's the dress code. I think today, I think there are very few industries that a suit and tie is the look. There's a very clear consultant uniform. I have that. It's the khaki pants with the blue blazer. I don't think you could go wrong today with a sports jacket and a collared shirt. But I typically advise people, maybe you do one step up from what you've seen. So if you see people that just have a collared shirt on like I do now, maybe you go in with a sports jacket also. You can't lose. But if you're not doing that, let's say they do wear suits and ties, you think, oh, I'm going to be casual and going with just a button-down shirt. That's not a good thing. But if you could always dress down once you're in there and take your jacket off, take your tie off, whatever. But I would look at the culture, try to talk to people, look at pictures.
For years, I've worked for a company where the owner of the company wears jeans. So, but I've been wearing Dockers and a collared shirt, not necessarily button down, which is what I think is business casual. But well, I can ask the recruiter too.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I would definitely ask, because you also want to be comfortable. You don't want to walk in there and you're thinking, oh my God, I dressed wrong. I'm inappropriately dressed. I can't believe that. You don't need that.
Right. And I haven't had an interview at the company yet. It's all been Zoom, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen that commercial where this guy is like walking around his house thinking he's going to have a Zoom meeting. He has a button-down shirt and his underwear. And then he walks out onto the patio and the guests are there. And he's, oh, I thought this was going to be a Zoom call. So one thing I do know, don't walk in with your Zoom wear, with your suit, and your jacket and tie on and your underwear below.
That I won't do.
All right, good. You didn't need me to tell you that, huh?
No,
tell you that.
Yeah, that much I know. But...
And one thing to keep in mind about the pictures of people in the company on the website, the pictures may not be people in the company. A lot of websites are built with stock photos, and they're trying to project an image. So take it with a grain of salt, and then you'll say, well, but I'll look at the photos of the executives. The executives will always wear a formal wear. So, grain of salt. Use it as part of your information gathering.
I might need a little time if I were made an offer to go shopping for some appropriate clothes.
Hey, yeah, or you could always press your sweatpants.
Yeah, well, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, folks?
David, I see in the chat, and the person who asked about the one pager asked about whether it could go on LinkedIn, and definitely, you could put that in the featured section. Another thing too, as I mentioned, I think technology is where age discrimination stems from. Are you comfortable with technology? So another thing you could do, if you look in the contact section of your LinkedIn profile, and there are options like website and different things you could put in there. You could put links in there. Now, you may not have a website. If you do, that's great. But you could also put in there a link to your Google Drive, let's say, that document in there. And again, it may be a subtle thing. It may not even be a conscious thing that people get, but they might see, boy, this person put a link in their contact information. They know what they're doing. They're up to date. They're comfortable. All those little things can contribute to showing you being out of date or up to date.
Perfect. Thank you.
But Ken, don't you have to be a little careful about your own personal website? This can be just a version of Facebook and have things in there that are personal, family, that kind of thing, but do leave an impression.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Social media has killed some careers. I would say it would be a separate site, almost like a portfolio. It's not a public site. It's not something that you want people commenting on or posting to. It's just your work stuff.
Terrific. All right. Well, Ken, thank you very much. And folks, thank you for participating this morning with all of us and your activity and questions for Ken. Just before we officially wrap up, again, we are going to stick around with the recording off in just a moment. Want to let you know about our meeting next month. As you know, the Breakfast Club does meet monthly each second Saturday morning of the month. We start at 8 o'clock. And actually, we open the electronic doors before that. And so June 10th, Alex Freund will be our presenter. Can you influence the influencer? He has 6 ways that you can. The influencer is the person making the decision, whether it's the recruiter or the hiring manager. And he's going to talk about, can you influence the influencer? So that will be our program again next month. So Ken, once again, thank you for being such a good friend and supporter of job seekers and the Breakfast Club of New Jersey. And we'll simply say until we get to see all of you, hopefully by next month, either virtually or in person, we'll look forward to seeing you at our meeting here. So have a good day, everybody. Thank you.